Welcome to the WP Builds podcast, bringing you the latest news, interviews, and fun for the WordPress community. Now, welcome your host, Nathan Wrigley. Hello there, and welcome once again to the WP Builds podcast. You've reached episode number 391, entitled, What the Heck is an Immutable Website? Tim Nash knows and explains all. It was published on Thursday, the 26th of September, 2024. My name's Nathan Wrigley, and before I am joined by the ever so knowledgeable Tim Nash, a few bits of housekeeping. The first thing to mention is that Black Friday is just around the corner. It may seem like a long way off, but of course it's not. And over at WP Builds, we're preparing you all of the WordPress things. We've got a page up and running. If you head to wpbuilds.com/black, it's a bit Spartan at the moment, meaning there's not a lot of stuff there. But if you have a product in the WordPress space, that could be hosting, it could be a plugin, a theme, a block, anything really, then hit the Add a Deal button and completely for free, we will add your Black Friday deal and we'll publish it onto this much visited page during the run-up to Black Friday. If you would like to sponsor that page and get your product or service in a pride of place top at the spot, head to one of the black sponsor cards at the top and hit the Get Started button. We've been joined by WS Form already, and we would really love to have some other contributors there as well. So once again, it's completely free to put your product on there, completely free to browse, search, filter. Go bookmark it now, wpbuilds.com/black. Once more, wpbuilds.com/black for all of your WordPress goodness in the run-up to Black Friday. The WP Builds podcast is brought to you today by GoDaddy Pro. GoDaddy Pro, the home of managed WordPress hosting that includes free domain, SSL, and 24/7 support. Bundle that with The Hub by GoDaddy Pro to unlock more free benefits to manage multiple sites in one place, invoice clients, and get 30% off new purchases. You can find out more at go.me/WP Builds. We're also joined by Bluehost. Bluehost, redefine your web hosting experience with Bluehost Cloud. Managed WordPress hosting that comes with lightning-fast websites, 100% network uptime, and 24/7 priority support. With Bluehost Cloud, the possibilities are out of this world. Experience it today at bluehost.com/cloud. And we're also joined by Omnisend. Omnisend, do you sell your stuff online? Then meet Omnisend. Yes, that Omnisend, the email and SMS tool that helps you make $73 for every dollar spent. The one that's so good, it's almost boring. Hate the excitement of roller coaster sales? Prefer a steady line going up? Try Omnisend today at omnisend.com. And sincere thanks go to GoDaddy Pro, Bluehost, and Omnisend for their support of the WP Builds podcast. Okay, what have we got for you today? Well, we've got Tim Nash. I like to call him Sir Tim Nash. Very knowledgeable. He is all about WordPress and security, and he's discussing with us today something which I'd never heard of, an immutable website. And this is a real tinfoil hat episode, so get your mug of coffee, put your tinfoil hat on, and be prepared to geek out. Tim talks about all of the variety of ways that you can lock down the operating system, as well as other things to make your website truly immutable and therefore extremely secure. As I said, strap in. I hope that you enjoy it. I am joined on the podcast by Tim Nash. How are you doing, Tim?
Hi, thanks for having me. I'm doing okay.
If you could see Tim Nash, as I can see Tim Nash, then you'd realise Tim is surrounded by all sorts of lovely wildlife. He lives in West Yorkshire, which is a delightful part of the world, and out of the window over his shoulder is just a lovely pasture with horses in it. It's very calming, Tim. It's very nice.
I need to be calming. Calming influence. People come to me and they think full of rage and worry and anger, and all I do, I just sort of show them my window and they calm down and then we discuss their problems.
The reason that people come to Tim all full of angst and anger is that Tim is a WordPress, well, general internet, I guess, online security expert. And I'm guessing that most of your clients approach you in a time of need and fairly anxious. Things have gone wrong. Is that the case?
A good percentage do. I forget. I'm in a bit of a weird position where half my clients come to me because they need to come to me right now, this very second. They have something that's going wrong. And the other half come to me because they want to be really proactive and fix things before they go wrong. Obviously, we all prefer to be in the second group.
Yeah.
But the first group, when they arrive, they're normally, I'm the last resource. So it's like, oh no. Well, we're going to throw the dice and we're going to go to Tim and see if he can fix it.
When the internet started, I had such high hopes that humanity's best would be online. And, everybody had pulled together for this fabulous resource, this amazing thing. It's such a shame that people decided to sort of spoil it and create viruses and write malware and all of this kind of stuff. But I guess on some level it keeps you busy and keeps you in work.
Yeah. And it's one of those things that's like, whenever someone's like, there's a massive vulnerability has been released, there's part of me that's going, this is terrible. And obviously I don't want people to do it. There's another part of me that's going, aha, ka-ching.
Yeah. Okay, so there's every cloud and all that has a silver lining. That's great. I guess we should probably give you a minute to give us your bio, paint a picture of who you are. You've been on this podcast, on the This Week in WordPress show, loads and loads of times. So if you've been a recipient of that, then you'll know Tim's voice and you'll know his credentials. But for those of you that just listen to the podcast, will you just give us your potted bio for a minute or so?
Yeah. So my name's Tim Nash. I'm a WordPress security consultant here in the UK. And I have been involved in WordPress for so long that plugins weren't available when I first started. And I started in WordPress because I wanted to build a membership site. So I started to put it together. Then plugins came out. And so I started building a plugin. And I ended up building one of the very first commercial WordPress plugins and thought, I can make a business out of this.
Nice. Tiny
bit too early. Commercialization of WordPress wasn't really a thing. And it sort of, but we did manage to get a little bit of a company going. We had a little office in Leeds. At one point, we had 6 people. We had a telephone. You could ring us up.
Oh, nice.
Imagine that now. You're like WordPress plugin. You could ring up. Dave would answer the support phone. But we were a little bit too ahead of our time. We got booed at a WordCamp for being a commercial WordPress.
So that was in the period where it was still sort of verboten to pay for things.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. We got booed while sponsoring.
Oh, okay. That must have been a hard pill to swallow. Yeah.
It wasn't the nicest of feelings, I'll be honest. But after that, I worked for some large organizations helping to drive open source and open source security into big NGOs and government agencies. And then I went and worked for a hosting company and set up one of the first managed WordPress hosting and one of the largest in the UK. At which point I went from securing a dozen sites that were my properties and little people, friends, family, a couple of clients, but to 100,000 sites overnight.
Wow, yeah, that's a big step.
Which suddenly, the scale changed dramatically. And when COVID happened, sort of like many people, I think I had some life changes. And so I sort of said goodbye to the hosting company, working at the hosting company, and took this role on as a security consultant. Most people, if they've met me at a WordCamp or a meetup.
Yeah.
And I'm probably best known for giving scary security talks. I'm really lucky and fortunate that my previous employer would sponsor me to go to these events. So I basically had the job of going around the country scaring people.
Yeah, it's nice.
It's possibly the greatest job. But then when I've got my daughter and all of a sudden it's like, well, maybe I should be at home a bit more. And COVID made sure we would stay at home. And I don't find I want to go do that again.
No. Can I ask you a question, right? This is kind of apropos of nothing, but equally it's kind of an interesting insight. The security landscape seems to change really quickly. New OSs come out, new devices come out. as far as I can tell, it moves at a rate almost like nothing else. New threats are undermining things all the time. You hear about things in the national press, but I guess in the tech press a lot more. What I'm trying to get at is it the kind of industry which, looking back, is really difficult to keep up with? Because, with the best will in the world, nobody's getting any younger. And it seems to be moving at breakneck speed all the time, and in fact accelerating all the time. Is it really hard work to keep up with what's going on, given that it just seems to accelerate?
It certainly can be. I found myself, the other day I was listening to a podcast and there was somebody talking about something on it. I can't even remember what it was. And I was there going, I have no idea what all of the words they just said out of their mouth. It's made worse, I think, by the fact that the security industry is very good at the marketing random terms and acronyms. And so everything has 28 alternative acronyms that you need to learn and lots of marketing phrases that to mean the same thing. So there is a lot of times where you sort of go, oh, that sounds really new. And then you start digging away and go, oh, it's just this. They've just given it a fancy term and a fancy name. And a lot of the new threats and things that you see coming out and they sound like they're new really are based on very basic principles. And so there you can still learn to cybersecurity. And yes, you have to keep on top of the trends, but there isn't too much stuff that's new. It's just how we're presenting it that keeps changing.
Yeah. Oh, well, that's nice to know. And you seem to be on top of it anyway, and it seems to be something that keeps you going. So that was a nice intro. Thank you so much. However, having said all of that, that's not what we're going to talk about. So maybe we should just erase the first 5 minutes of this podcast. No, we shan't. Because this is about something else. And I've got to say from the outset, dear listener, I have no idea what is about to happen. Usually I've got a fair idea, but this episode occurred because of some conversation which happened, which I was not really party to, but I was fairly close by, and I overheard it and said, Tim, will you come on my podcast and talk about that? Do you want to tell the story of WordCamp Whitley Bay this year, just quickly, and that'll give us the backdrop to what we're going to talk about?
So I was at WordCamp Whitley Bay. We were, it was the after party. We were sitting around talking, just generally chatting about WordPress. And there was a couple of us who were talking about how we manage deployments and how we talk about sites and keeping things up to date. And I'm very much known as if you know me more recently, you probably know I'm a massive advocate of automatic updates. And that I tell everybody they should have automatic updates, that there's very few times you shouldn't have automatic updates. And I'm sitting there and I say, yeah, automatic updates. No, you're doing. So the person who was sort of like saying, oh, we don't quite do automatic updates, but we do that. And I was encouraging them and saying, yeah, and you can take the next step to automatic updates. And then I dropped the bombshell. Of course, I don't use automatic updates. And the instant hypocrite sound that went through them.
Yeah.
And instead, I explained that, I use a basis of an immutable file system and an immutable WordPress. And we started talking about that. And it turned out that one of the large BIP agencies had someone there as well. And they went, well, that's pretty much what we do. And there was this like shock from the other people who were like, what is this? And I was like, oh, I thought this was sort of something that everybody did.
No.
Obviously, I didn't really think that, but it is quite a technical and geeky thing, but it isn't very common.
Okay. So immutable in my head means non-changeable. It means that you set it and forget it. That's kind of where I'm at with that word. And I don't know if quite that maps to what it is that you're talking about. Okay, so we're going to be talking about immutable websites. I'm guessing this has got to do with the OS on some level, or the operating system and how it interacts with the files and who's got permission to change things. Go right back to the beginning, explain immutable in this context, and then start to lay out the jigsaw pieces so that we can understand.
Well, let's start with the word mutable, because that's probably an easier one for people to get their heads around. So we think if something mutates, it changes. Now, you mutate your WordPress site every time that you publish a post, upload a file, make changes to a plugin or whatever. The underlying bits of it change, not quite constantly, but they change.
Yeah.
And when you make something immutable, it stops changing. Now, we use the word immutable WordPress in a way that is a bit disingenuous. So we start by stepping right the way back with what the goal is. And if the goal is we don't want bad actors to be able to change the file system. We also don't want our developers to be able to change the file system, or our random system sysadmins, or our authors, other people. We want to lock down the file system so it is almost impossible to make changes.
Okay, Tim, I'm just going to stop you there because knowing the audience that we've got, I imagine quite a lot of the people have never interacted with the file system in WordPress. They go to their URL, they type in WP admin or something, log in, and it's just there. It's all magic. They might have paid a company to set up the hosting and all of that. But dear listener, your WordPress website, you could, if you wanted, view all of the files on your computer. There's just a bunch of files and a database. There might be some other complex things thrown in there, but it is literally a bunch of files, PHP files and other things. And so that's what Tim's on about. You can, when you download it from WordPress.org, you are downloading a bunch of files, which then create a database when you set it up. And okay, sorry, I just thought I should say that.
Yeah, that's all right. We could get into immutable.
Yeah, we really could.
That stops in a little bit. By the end of this, you're going to be locking down your own machines. Yeah. But when it comes to all these things change. Let's now go, okay, so our goal is we want to lock things down as much as possible. Why would we want to do this? Well, we don't want necessarily, if a bad actor did compromise the site, the one thing we really would like them not to be able to do is to compromise the server as well. If you compromise the site, you're limited to what's in the database, maybe making entries and changes to the database, maybe some limited actions on the site. It's not great, but it's better than them having full system access to your server and everything. So we want to, from a bad actor perspective, we also want it so that if we have a development team, so you have someone who you pay to look after the site, and you make changes, and then they make changes, but they've made changes in their own little special place, be that Git or some sort of development system somewhere. And then they push their changes, your changes get overwritten, and it all gets very complicated.
Right, yeah.
We want to try and make it as simple as possible. So when we then think of this and we can go, okay, well, what do we actually need to write? So by writing, we mean putting a file there or putting a record in a database. And that's it. You're there going, oh, well, actually, to publish a post, I need to have access to the database because I need to be able to log in and it needs to look up to the database. I need to be able to push data into the database as the author. And I might have some pictures or something. So I need to upload those pictures to the file uploads. But that's all you need. So if we can make it so that just the uploads folder and the database are writable, but everything else is not, then we're going to have a much more secure system.
Got it. Okay. So again, just going back, when you're talking about writable, this is an operating system level permission. So this is, let's take the example of let's go with Linux, because that's what everybody's on, I'm pretty sure, in the olden days, at least anyway. And there's all sorts of, there's several permissions that come with any folder or file, one of them being write. So if you have a folder that has write permissions, depending on whether your user has that permission, you can write to it. But if you can basically say, okay, this folder is non-writable, nobody can write anything to it, that means it's kind of walled off. You've built a big brick wall around it, and if everything remains the same, nobody can change that. It's completely cast iron protected, right? Have I summed that up about right? Okay.
Well, yeah. So if we take our most simplest version, and we're going to call this immutable Mark 1.
Okay, nice. Okay, yeah, good.
So we can just go into our. So normally when you set up a WordPress site, there's some instructions on something called chmod, which is, if you've never come across it, the chances are it's automatically been set up for you. But you can go in and you can change the file permissions, and we have read, write, and execute, and for user group and everyone. And historically, everybody would set this to what's called 777, which is to do with how bytes are formed. But it's basically that would mean read, write, and execute for everyone, group, and you, which is bad.
Yeah, bad. Yes.
So really, we only need to read these files. So if we set every file to be read-only, except the uploads folder, now our little WordPress site itself is completely locked down. It still works. Nathan's looking at me.
Yeah, no. Sorry, I thought you were.
How does it still work?
No. Yeah, well, I was just going to say how exactly that. My head was thinking, but if everything is locked down except the uploads folder, you are going to have to explain that, because surely there must be situations where, hang on a minute, it can't. I don't know. You want to upload or modify. No, okay, no. All right, okay. My head's got too much in it now. Keep talking, because I am confused.
So, we lock everything down. It's completely locked down. We've set it all to read only, except for the uploads folder. Our database we'll come to later.
Oh, okay. All right. Okay, right.
But we'll assume that we can read and write into the database.
Okay.
We can now publish posts. We can still log in. As far as our WordPress site's concerned, it's fine. We do have a few problems though.
This is where I was going. Yeah, go on. Yeah.
And one being, Nathan wants to install a plugin.
Right. The first example, they don't belong in the uploads folder in that sort of sense. Yep.
Yeah. So you go to add plugins and you click the install now, and you get a prompt notice up that says, I can't write to the plugins folder. And you go, no, you can't, can you? But nor can any of the bad actors.
Right.
That's a good thing.
Okay.
So we have several ways we can deal with this. One is we can say, well, okay, every time I want to update a plugin or add a plugin, I will run a script or go through, and I will go to the plugins folder and go, you can now you can have read and write permissions for period, do your upload, and then put it back to read only. This is cumbersome. It's doable. And in our very first thing, we could do this with some scripting. So we can write a little program that goes through, and every time we want to do an update, it sets the file permissions to let us update. We do our updates, and then it sets the file permissions at the end and says, stop. And I, as a little experiment, when automatic updates first came out, there's some hooks and filters. So in WordPress, hooks allow you to add your own code to the end of things. So I wrote a little thing that when it started the automatic updates, it's basically got the file permissions, told the operating system, hey, I'd like access. And the operating system fired a little script that gave the access. The updates ran. And then at the end, we had a hook that fired back and said, I've finished. And it set it back to read only. That's fine.
Yeah.
Gets cumbersome.
Yeah.
But it works well. It has some big advantages when you have lots of admin users. Because admin users are horrible creatures who want to install things and cause chaos wherever they are. And you don't really want, if you've ever developed a site, if you're an agency, the worst thing for you is a non-agency admin owner coming along and installing the 18th plugin of the day because they've been testing it out. They can't do any of that anymore. You've completely locked it down.
I can well imagine that so I imagine you, and certainly I, was dealing with sites which were a little bit more dynamic than that. You know, people were logging in as bona fide editors or, curators, whatever it may be, of content, and then logging out again and what have you. So those sites themselves needed to have that, that ability to upload content and what have you. But it occurs to me that a really significantly large amount of WordPress websites don't need any of that. They are brochure sites. They're born, they're put into existence, they got 5 pages, and that's it. And they go out there and live their life online, and they don't need any updating of any kind. There must be literally millions, tens of, possibly hundreds of millions of those. So they'd be perfect for that, right? And you wouldn't need to even need to. Yeah.
I mean, you could argue that they probably should be static HTML
sites. Right, okay, yeah, good point.
But you could generate the HTML version. But if you didn't want to do that because maybe you have a contact form
Oh, yeah.
or something that's slightly dynamic, then this is the ideal scenario because now we can lock the whole thing down. We can still go in and add posts and pages, but we don't need to worry about it. And when we do need to do updates, we can go in and change it. Now, not doing updates doesn't mean that just because we've made everything read-only, doesn't mean that we've got rid of all potential attacks that could be done against this site. Overwhelmingly, a large amount of vulnerabilities are based around the database and gaining access to the database. And the database might still have things that we don't really want them publishing posts. We don't want them gaining access to information. If you've got a contact form or an email list that's signing up, you don't want them to get access to that data. But we can sort of take those and go, okay, well, there are other problems for another day to deal with. But by preventing them from being able to access and write to our file system, we're saving ourselves a lot of time. The problem is they can still write to the file system because we've given them those uploads.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
So this is where we can do certain things like, hey, don't let PHP files run in the uploads file. That's just a standard thing. You should probably be doing that if you're not already. Now, if you don't know if you are, then chances are you are because your host will have set this up to stop this. But we can do certain things to prevent files being executed in the upload file. Literally, we can tell it not to execute files in there. Mm-hmm. But we're probably best off if we sort of go to version 2.
Ooh, okay, right.
So version 2 is where we go, we've got our operating system, our server, and we've got our uploads folder, but we're going to move our uploads folder somewhere else.
Oh, okay.
We're going to move it to something like S3 buckets, which is something that's set up by AWS. You might have come across them. They have just file storage areas. They call them block storage systems. And it's basically a remote location you can dump files to, and then you can sort of pretend that it's connected to your site. People like Linode, you find lots of these solutions that refer to themselves as S3 compatible. And there are a couple of really good plugins for interacting to make your media library being uploaded on S3 or somewhere else, but then appear as if they're just on your local server. So now we can have our uploads somewhere else, and if they get compromised,
got it.
It's in a bucket somewhere else on Amazon's system. And to be honest, Amazon's big enough to be able to deal with.
Right? Yeah.
Problem by themselves. There's nothing to execute at this point. They're just sitting in a file server elsewhere.
So it's literally just a dump for files, and if somebody compromises that, all they're going to get is a bunch of files which were probably publicly available anyway. They'll just have access to them. So you're kind of removing that from your own file structure, putting it somewhere else, and then pointing WordPress. Every time it wants something in the uploads folder, it just gets hijacked and it says, the uploads folder is over here. And WordPress imagines that that's on your server, if you like. And then grabs it. And I'm also imagining if it's something like AWS, but for AWS, read all the other possible solutions out there. It's pretty cheap as well, right? It's not something that's probably going to cost you a lot of money.
That's really cheap.
Yeah.
And if we're at this point where we're scaling to a point where it's not cheap, there are ways to make it cheaper. This is where you'd use a CDN and things like that as well to bring that cost down. So we're not even having to call those files every single time. We'd more likely than have it on S3, but then call it via a CDN call elsewhere.
Okay. So we've locked the file system down. That was phase 1 or version 1. Version 2 was then offload the media library or the uploads folder to somewhere else. Okay, great. I'm with you.
So now we've got this scenario. We can introduce something like version control. So we can introduce our Git deployments, and this is something that most people who are in agencies and developers will talk to you about. And if you're not a developer, you gloss over. But it basically means we can store the code in one place and go, when I'm happy with the code as it is, I'm going to push it onto the server. Great. So now instead of having our little script that that's doing anything complicated, we have put our code in the Git repository, and then we say have a mechanism that can deploy the code. And then during that deploy, we make the system writable. The code gets deployed, and then we make the system read-only again.
Right. So that then, therefore, let's say you're using GitHub, because that's one that everybody's largely familiar with, I imagine. You can do all of the updates. You could write your new content. You could have the fabulous new plugin that you wanted, push it from Git, and then it would become writable for the period of time Git was interacting, and then Git finishes, and the handshake on the way out is, become immutable again.
Yes.
Got it.
The content that's in the database users can still log in this scenario. We're still publishing content through the websites we would normally. We're not making anybody learn any weird esoteric systems or anything. So that is our version 2. We're feeling quite,
that's pretty good.
Yeah. This is feeling good. This is feeling very achievable. So we're now going to go to version 3.
Okay.
Which is most people's websites sit on something called a LAMP stack.
Yes.
Linux, Apache, MySQL, PHP. Apache often swapped out for Nginx. MySQL often swapped out for something like MariaDB. Yep. But these all sit on the same server.
Yeah.
Oh, your MySQL is on the same server as your PHP and your Apache. They don't have to be, and MySQL is not designed that way. When you connect to the MySQL server, it's actually making what is effectively a network request.
Right.
It's just looped.
Just happens to be local anyway. Yeah.
So our next step moves the MySQL. We say, hi, MySQL, can you be not here? Can you be on a different server?
So this is exactly the same as step 2, which was offload the uploads file.
Yeah.
This is offload the database. Right.
The only difference now is that we have MySQL on a remote server.
Okay.
We've got file uploads in a S3 type bucket, and now we have a box that has our files, our Apache or Nginx, and our PHP on there. We can now lock this down even further, because now we can say we can, if we're managing the server, we can start saying, well, now we don't need to have read access to anything but like a few things for sessions.
Neat.
And so, okay. So now all the underlying stuff can start to be locked down.
Okay. I'm following you. I'm with you so far.
Okay.
So there's three different things happening at the same time now. Okay, keep going. Sorry, this is great.
So now, at this point, we're like, wait. There's surely systems and things that do this already, because now, to be honest, our little deployment script's getting a bit longer
right
here.
Yeah.
We're having to do mocks, and we quickly discover that there's something called immutable operating systems.
Ew. Okay.
So, first of all, on our little adventure, we go, oh, wait, you can make whole file systems read-only.
Huh,
so you can, rather than you changing individual permissions of directories, you can just say, no, I just want this entire volume to be read-only, please.
So everything above the level of your WordPress website, or from the WordPress website down, if you like, just make that. Okay.
But we can then the idea of an immutable OS is that everything is frozen. All the applications are frozen. Because if you think of an operating system, it is just a large collection of little applications.
Yeah.
You even when we talk about things like a kernel isn't one thing. It's a collection of little applications that interact, that basically are the center of your operating system. And then there are layers of other applications out. And all of a sudden, we can make all of these read-only.
Okay. All right. And that's on the operating system level.
Yes.
What can you just shout a few names of immutable operating system vendors, if you like?
Probably the one that most people are familiar with is something called NixOS.
Okay, yeah.
With declarative operating system. But you've got most of the major Linux systems now have an immutable version. It is the hip topic.
It's the hotness, all the hotness.
Yeah,
okay, all right.
Exactly. But I mean, this hotness has been going for like 10 years. I mean,
Yeah.
Linux is hotness is one of these.
It's quite warm now.
Clean things in decades rather than necessarily weeks or years. So now we can lock the whole thing down. But deploying this is going to get more clunky.
Right.
We got to, forgot. We're on 4, aren't we? So we're going to go up to 4.
We were on 4, I think, yeah.
Okay, so we're going up to 5 then. And you can get this concept of an image.
Oh.
Which is basically your whole operating system. Like you imagine you've got a hard drive.
Yes.
You take the hard drive out and you copy it.
Like freeze it.
Yeah, freeze it in time and take it and put it so that you've got it. And now, every time we deploy, what we actually do is we take our copy of our hard drive, we implant our new WordPress changes onto our copy, freeze that, and then push it back in.
Oh, that's neat. Yeah, I can totally see. So when it's frozen, if you like, it's not even there. It's just like it's stored somewhere, but it's in some sort of blob. And the blob needs to be unblobbed, for want of a better word, defrosted, if you like. And then you make your changes, and then you refreeze it again, stick it in the freezer. It's no longer available. And so it literally cannot be messed around with.
Yeah. The whole thing, you put it in and it's there. And it's coming in, and the writable parts are still separated away. We've got our database over here. We've got our uploads in our S3 bucket. So it doesn't matter what we change it through. Now, the thing about doing that is writing out an operating system, overlaying changes, making it immutable, and then uploading it takes a bit of time.
Right.
I imagine most people do not, even though we're measuring this in minutes, not in decades or anything, but it's still a lot of time.
Yeah, a bit of waiting around that is a bit of a pain. Yeah.
So this is where we do something called red-green deployment, which is basically we have a live server, and then we just spin up another server with our new image.
Right.
When it's ready, we say, stop sending traffic to the old server, send it to the new one.
Huh. Okay, let me just encapsulate that in my head then. So at the point where you want to defrost it, if you like, you build that, you defrost it onto this red server, let's call it, and the green server is currently taking all the traffic. When it's built, ready to go, you've done all your checks and you're sure that it's exactly what you want, you just say, okay, now point all the traffic to the red server. It now becomes the green server becomes the red server, and you kill what's now the obsolete red server. And I'm moving my hands all over the place.
Yeah. You've pretty much got it. The only thing you don't do is delete that.
Oh, you keep it as a snapshot kind of thing.
Because you keep that, because now you've got if something has gone wrong,
right, yeah.
You can hop back.
Got it. Okay.
This also means you can always do your testing.
Yes. Yeah.
Because you can test over here and make sure your tests are passing before you flip and move.
Okay, yeah, no, that makes sense. So, and then in that situation, I don't know, you might keep like 10 or 15 or 100 or whatever. And I'm going to call them snapshots of previous versions of your website until at some point you just decide, okay, those ones beyond the 100, they just fall off a cliff now because we're happy. You know, it's been going for a year or more without any problems. We're probably okay. Gosh. Okay, so that's step 5. Dare I ask, is there a step 6?
Well, at this stage,
Tim at this moment is literally rolling up his sleeves and cracking his knuckles.
At this stage, we've got a fairly robust system, but it's all getting a little bit complicated to manage.
Yeah, I mean, it really, at this point, it feels like you're in the weeds of like, you know, tinfoil hats and propeller caps and all of that kind of, you know, you're a real nerd at this point.
Yeah, and so we then sort of like go, okay, well, we were never going to get out of that stage, so we're stuck in tinfoil hats world, but we can at least at the moment whenever we're putting up a new server, we're going to have to go, okay, we're going to need to change the IP address on the DNS, so we're going to have to keep our, you know, and do all these hot swapping on DNS stuff, and it's all going to get a bit messy. So we introduce our final thing, which is a load balancer.
Right.
So we have a thing in the front that says, hi, I'm WPBuilds.com. It's not really. It's just a plate. It's just literally sitting there going, you want WP Builds? it's that way.
Yeah.
And it points it in the direction of whichever server it wants to. Now we can scale this. Because up until now, we've been talking about one site being on one server, one stack. But let's now say JP Builds is obviously as the premier WordPress podcast.
You're very kind.
A lot of traffic.
It's almost immeasurable, Tim, frankly.
Yeah. Way more than that Bob fella who...
I didn't say that, Bob. It wasn't me.
way more. So Nathan needs to scale out, and he suddenly needs to gets a rush of traffic. Well, now we can use the load balancer and spin up, say, 5 or 10 of these servers.
Oh, I see. Of course. Yeah, that makes perfect sense. So,
and because there's no data on
got it.
We can just infinitely scale these out. Well, not quite infinitely, but we can have 5, 10, 15, 20 of these. And because our data is nicely set on our database and elsewhere, and we can likewise do the same with the database server. We can start putting that into a cluster. We can have multiple database servers. So this allows us to go from a site that is quite on a little rickety foundations of its little VPS to being able to scale horizontally massively.
Yeah, to whatever the internet can throw at it. Yeah.
Hey, only when we start, and then this allows us to do things like when we go to deploy our new version that we've fully tested, and you can still be doing daily updates with this. This doesn't stop daily updates or automatic updates. We just automate the process behind the scenes. But this allows us to go, okay, I want to test it by only sending 10% of my traffic to the new server.
Okay, right. The load balancer takes care of that. You can just...
So you can set up some... And now we have a really reliable, robust system that can be used in pretty much every scenario that you can think of with WordPress in a safe way. And this is... At this point, we go, well, okay, once we have this, there is no way we're doing this manually. Now we are using some sort of what we call an orchestration tool. Now, that can be something as simple as a bunch of bash scripts.
Right.
It can be something like Ansible, but it can also be something more complicated, like Kubernetes and all sorts of things that are like that. Or in cases of some operating systems like Nix OS is based off the Nix language, which is a declarative file and try that again. Which is a declarative language underneath. So when you open up a Nix file, it's just a big file which defines where everything goes, what you're doing, and how you're doing it. You can use Nix to deploy itself and your WordPress site. And it much like you could use a Docker and Docker Compose file, if you're familiar with those. And suddenly, we're in a position where making changes to your WordPress site is as simple as having a bot that runs in your Git repository that goes, okay, run the updates, grabs all the updates from WordPress.org, runs a build process automatically, deploys your site, does the tests. If the tests pass, then the site gets updated. If the tests fail, it sends you a message in Slack or wherever you like to get your messages saying, hey, something's probably wrong. We've not deployed this version. Come check it out. So you can still have your automatic updates, which is what I do.
Yeah.
I'm not total hypocrite.
No,
I just don't use the automatic update.
The feature within
WordPress. I still have automatic updates. I don't go and do updates to my site every day, plugins every day, but they just run automatically via, in my case, it's via a Git instance, but you can do it on GitHub, you can do it on GitLab, you can, however you get your code deployment systems.
Yeah, well, whatever Git you have of choice. So it strikes me that, for the average user who is maybe listening to this podcast, a lot of that is very interesting, very technical, and probably just a bit of an eye-opener. Like, gosh, I didn't even know that kind of thing was possible. I'm just used to going to my affordable hosting and paying them a monthly amount. And it probably isn't for them. If you've got a small site with not much traffic and you can actually keep on top of that and everything's okay, a lot of those cogs are probably unnecessary. However, on the enterprise level, not only does that allow you to just more or less scale it, and you use the word infinite, which I think is basically appropriate, isn't it? It can be scaled to whatever resources are available in the company that's got that cluster or what have you. But you can just keep going. So it enables a big website which might get crazy amounts of traffic on one day of the year because they've got this giant sale or something, but also at the same time locks it down. So they increase their posture, their security posture, or decrease their footprint for security, and at the same time have this system where it can be rolled, scaled, measure the traffic. If they need it, they can just add loads more servers on the fly and then roll it all back. And it strikes me that at the enterprise level, this kind of stuff is, I'm going to say de rigueur. Is this the sort of stuff at enterprise level which is just par for the course?
It certainly is part of the course in the wider ecosystem.
Yeah.
And you will find this in places, especially places that need compliance. Because you can't, for many organizations, they must know, particularly, let's say, a financial organization like a bank, they need to know what state their server is in. And another one of these sort of hot topics is this idea of code as compliance as code, which is where you basically make sure that your code, you write tests inside your code stack to guarantee that your stack matches the compliance requirements that you need.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And this is one way to do this and to guarantee it. So, but even if you're right back at the start, we go right our way back to level 1. Just knowing and understanding, hey, I have file permissions.
Yeah.
I can set these to read only for certain things. I can make my WP config file, which you are never, ever going to want to have writable.
No.
Except that one time.
Moment in time, yeah.
Yeah, there was that one moment where you went, oh yeah, I needed it just at the start. But it's not something that you're going to write into on a regular basis. You can make that read only.
Yeah. So even if you've just taken that out, if you've just got this intuition from this podcast episode that the file structure itself is something that you can tinker with. However, caveat emptor, don't just go poking around if you don't know what you're doing, coming up with little 3-digit codes. Oh, I'll put a 6 and a 7 and another 7 in there. Let's see what that does.
If you are going to do that, lower is better.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
Higher is bad.
Yeah, exactly.
Avoid the one number 7 and 6 if possible.
Yeah. Oh, that's really fascinating. Do you know, on the WordPress side of things, is this something that enterprise is maybe the wrong word, some of the hosting companies are sort of moving towards? Do you know if, and we don't need to name names, but do some of the vendors of hosting in inverted commas, do they offer this as sort of one-click solution? Pay us a few $100s a month and we'll just do all of this for you.
Yes, I mean, there are certain companies do offer something similar to this. And once you're talking to the, hey, come and ask us for a quote on the price.
Okay, yeah, the pricing tier that's, let's talk.
Yeah, that if they're not talking about this, then there's a few years ago, I worked with a company who were having a massive DDoS attack. And I was really surprised, but Amazon themselves came along and said, let's help you out.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And set and deployed up something not dissimilar to this. Yeah. They had a few changes along the way. And I was really surprised that I was like, hang on, wait, Amazon, it will talk to you? Oh, wait, yeah.
Yeah. Normally it's pretty...
You have to have a certain budget attachment to that.
Normally it's hard to get them to talk to you. But yeah, I guess if you're spending several, if you've got a lot of zeros on your annual or monthly spend, they'll probably come and find you. Honestly, Tim, one of the nerdier episodes we've ever done. And I thank you for that. Can I just say, though, you, dear listener, you won't see this, but at the beginning of the episode, there were 4 horses and a few other animals in the field behind Tim. As Tim kept talking, they've slowly gone. And now that Tim's be quiet, they're coming back. And there's a human there now. So all I can say, Tim, is your speeches, they frighten off the animals.
I mean, the goat's got its back to us.
Yeah. So there you go. That was a real nerdy episode. Really enjoyed that. Immutable hosting. Don't say that you didn't find that out first from WP Builds, because you probably did. Thanks, Tim. I really appreciate that.
You're welcome.
Well, I hope that you enjoyed that. Always a pleasure chatting to Tim. Extremely knowledgeable, isn't he? A pleasure listening to all of those things. Hopefully you enjoyed it. If you did and you want to make a comment, head over to wpbuilds.com, search for episode number 391, and leave us a comment there. Just before we go, don't forget our Black Friday page, wpbuilds.com/black. If you're in the business of WordPress and you have a product or a service or whatever it may be, hit the Add a Deal button on that page to get your product or service listed for free. And don't forget, the sponsor slots at the top. So bookmark it now, wpbuilds.com/black. The WP Builds podcast is brought to you today by GoDaddy Pro. GoDaddy Pro, the home of managed WordPress hosting that includes free domain, SSL, and 24/7 support. Bundle that with The Hub by GoDaddy Pro to unlock more free benefits to manage multiple sites in one place, invoice clients, and get 30% off new purchases. You can find out more at go.me/WP Builds. We're also joined by Bluehost. Bluehost, redefine your web hosting experience with Bluehost Cloud. Managed WordPress hosting that comes with lightning-fast websites, 100% network uptime, and 24/7 priority support. With Bluehost Cloud, the possibilities are out of this world. Experience it today at bluehost.com/cloud. And we're also joined by OmniSend. OmniSend, do you sell your stuff online? Then meet OmniSend. Yes, that OmniSend, the email and SMS tool that helps you make $73 for every dollar spent. The one that's so good, it's almost boring. Hate the excitement of roller coaster sales? Prefer a steady line going up? Try OmniSend today at omnisend.com. And sincere thanks go to GoDaddy Pro, Bluehost, and OmniSend for their support of the WP Builds podcast. Okay, that truly is all I've got time for. I hope that you enjoyed it. We will be back next week. We'll also be back for our This Week in WordPress after a little hiatus because of a trip to WordCamp US. But we'll be back, and golly, there might well be some WordPress news this week if you have been keeping your eye on Twitter or indeed anywhere else. There'll be some news there. This Week in WordPress you'll find at wpbuilds.com/live, Monday, 2 p.m. UK time. Okay, that really is all that I've got time for this week. Stay safe, have a good week. Here comes some cheesy music. Bye-bye for now.